The moment my palm slipped, I knew I was screwed. I was walking fast, too fast, carrying a stack of client presentation folders in one hand and a nearly empty coffee cup in the other. I was late for the morning briefing, and Jay had already stepped out of conference room B to take a call. I didn't see him until I was too close. The folder clipped the edge of my coffee cup, and a tiny splash hit the bottom of his designer tie. Maybe 3 drops. Nothing more. He looked down like I'd stabbed him. "Do you know how much this costs?" he said, voice low and shaking with rage. $3,000 from Milan. Before I could get a single word out, before I could even say sorry, slap, open palm, right across my face. The sound echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. Right in front of Ashley, the receptionist, 2 junior associates, and Khalil, the intern. I just stood there, blinking, coffee dripping from my fingers onto the marble floor. My cheek burned like fire. No one moved. No one spoke. Ashley turned back to her computer screen like nothing happened. Monica, my team lead, rolled her eyes, and someone around the corner, Khalil, snorted a laugh. That laugh cut deeper than the slap. By noon, I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the problem. "She always takes things too personally," I heard Monica whisper to another manager by the water cooler. "She probably provoked him. You know how she gets." "She's so dramatic," Ashley added, not even trying to lower her voice when I walked past her desk. "Making a huge deal out of nothing." The whispers followed me everywhere. In the bathroom, by the elevator, during lunch. Every conversation stopped when I entered a room, then started again the second I left. HR called me in that afternoon. Tina, the head of human resources, sat across from her massive oak desk and folded her hands. "Jay told us what happened," she said, not meeting my eyes. "But we need to talk about your role in this situation. Maybe you should reflect on how you could have handled things differently." "My role? In getting slapped?" "He hit me," I said quietly, "in front of witnesses." Tina sighed like I was being difficult. "These things aren't black and white, Malia. We need to consider all perspectives." And just like that, I wasn't a victim. I was a liability, an overreactor, emotional, difficult. Every single person chose his side. Even the ones I thought were friends. That night, I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before I could drive home. My face still stung where he'd hit me. But the real pain was deeper. In my chest, in my stomach, in the part of me that still believed people were basically good. I thought about quitting, writing an angry email, screaming at them all, making a scene. But here's the thing about people like me, the quiet ones, the too nice ones. We don't explode. We evolve. I didn't scream. I didn't quit. Instead, I went home and opened my laptop. I created a new folder on my desktop and named it Documentation. Then I sat there, staring at the empty folder, and made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to react. I was going to plan. I pulled out my phone and opened my camera. In my bathroom mirror, under the harsh fluorescent light, you could still see the red mark on my cheek. I took a photo. Timestamp, 9:47 p.m. Then I started a list. Jay, Tina, Monica, Ashley, Khalil, every person who laughed, every person who turned away, every person who tried to erase me. I was going to take them out one by one, with truth, with patience, with strategy. The next morning I showed up to work like nothing happened. I smiled at Ashley, nodded to Monica, said good morning to Jay. They all looked surprised, maybe disappointed, that I wasn't crying or making a fuss. I started with Tina. She'd called me emotional, dramatic, difficult, said I needed to reflect on my role in getting slapped. But I knew something about Tina that she thought was buried deep in company files. Something I'd stumbled across months ago when I was helping with the quarterly audit. 2 interns had filed complaints against Jay before me. Sexual harassment, inappropriate comments, aggressive behavior. Both complaints had disappeared into Tina's desk drawer. Both interns had left quietly, signed NDAs, vanished without a trace. I'd kept copies of everything. Call it paranoia, but I always saved important documents to my personal drive. Just in case. Now I knew why. I spent my lunch break researching employment lawyers, found one with a reputation for taking on corporate bullies, made an appointment for that weekend. During my call with the lawyer, I laid out everything. The slap, the witnesses, Tina's history of covering up complaints, the pattern of silence and intimidation. "This is a strong case," the lawyer said. We're not just talking about assault, we're talking about systematic workplace harassment and cover-up. The letter went out the following Monday. Not to Jay, not to Tina, straight to the State Labor Department. 3 weeks later, Tina got called into an unexpected meeting with the board of directors. She came back to her office pale and shaking. Word spread quickly through the office grapevine. Internal audit was opening an investigation into HR practices. I watched from my desk as auditors arrived with boxes and laptops. They set up in the conference room next to Tina's office. For 2 weeks, they interviewed employees, reviewed files, and asked very specific questions about complaint procedures. Tina tried to act normal, but I could see the panic in her eyes every time she passed my desk. She knew exactly which complaint had triggered this investigation. 5 weeks after the audit began, there was a board meeting. Closed doors, hushed voices. When it ended, Tina's office was being cleaned out. The official announcement came the next morning. Tina Williams has decided to pursue other opportunities. We wish her well in her future endeavors. But everyone knew the truth. The HR manager who called victims emotional had been fired for misconduct. 6 weeks later, her job posting went live. Under new management, with strict oversight from the legal department. I sent myself flowers that day, no card needed. My Google Drive was looking very organized. With Tina gone, I moved to target number 2, Monica. Monica had rolled her eyes when Jay slapped me. She'd whispered about me being dramatic and taking things too personally. But what really bothered me was how she'd been stealing credit for my work for months. Every client presentation I'd built, every proposal I'd written, every campaign I'd designed, Monica's name was on the final version. She'd take my drafts, make tiny changes, then present them as her own ideas to the executives. But here's what Monica didn't know. Every digital file keeps metadata. Every document shows who created it, when it was made, who edited it, and when. Every email has a timestamp. Every Slack message gets logged. I'd been building my own quiet case for months without even realizing it. I spent a weekend creating a comprehensive dossier, screenshots of original files with my name as creator, email chains showing me sending first drafts, calendar invites proving I'd attended client meetings alone, then watched Monica present her work later. The evidence was overwhelming, but I wasn't ready to use it yet. Instead, I waited for the perfect moment. And that moment came when Monica volunteered to lead the biggest pitch of the year. Our potential contract with Intrepid Industries, worth over $2 million. I could have stopped her. Could have pointed out that she had no experience with that type of client. Could have warned the executives that she was in over her head. But I didn't. I smiled and wished her luck. The Intrepid Industries pitch was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Monica spent the entire week preparing, using materials I'd originally developed for a different client. She didn't understand the underlying strategy, the market research, or the competitive analysis. She just copied and pasted, hoping no one would notice. I watched her practice in the conference room, stumbling over numbers she didn't understand, mispronouncing industry terms, getting basic facts wrong about our own company's capabilities. Thursday morning arrived. Monica stood at the front of the room in her best suit, facing 3 executives from Intrepid Industries and our entire leadership team. She clicked through slides I'd originally created, trying to explain concepts she'd never researched. It was painful to watch. She confused revenue projections with cost estimates. She mixed up their main competitor with a completely different company. When they asked about implementation timelines, she gave them dates that were physically impossible. The Intrepid executives exchanged glances. Our leadership team shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Monica's voice got smaller and shakier with each slide. The pitch ended with polite applause and promises to be in touch soon. Everyone knew what that meant. Monica tried to blame external factors, bad slides, technical difficulties, unrealistic client expectations, but the damage was done. 2 days later, Intrepid Industries called me directly. We were impressed by the original strategic framework, the Intrepid Industries VP said during our phone call. We can tell there was real expertise behind those concepts. We'd like to work with whoever developed the core strategy. I had a choice. I could save the contract for our company and let Monica take credit again. Or I could be honest about who really created the work. I appreciate your confidence, I said carefully. But I should mention that I'm exploring other opportunities. If you're interested in continuing this project, you might want to speak with Blackstone Partners. They have a team that specializes in exactly what you're looking for. Blackstone Partners was our biggest competitor. They'd been trying to poach me for months. I wasn't technically giving away company secrets. I was just suggesting they talk to another firm. What happened after that was out of my hands. The following week, Intrepid Industries signed with Blackstone Partners. $2 million gone. Monica's reputation was in ruins, and the executives started asking uncomfortable questions about how she'd gotten promoted so quickly. Monica wasn't fired. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she was quietly moved to a new role, Special Projects Coordinator. No team, no major clients, no real responsibilities. She called it a lateral move. Everyone else called it what it was, professional exile. The woman who rolled her eyes at my humiliation was now a floating resource with no real purpose. Next up, Khalil, the intern who laughed. Khalil had been at the company for 3 months, working on social media and basic research tasks. But what really bothered me wasn't just his laugh, it was what he did afterward. He'd taken screenshots of our internal Slack conversations and edited them to make me look aggressive and threatening. Then he'd sent them to Jay and the remaining HR team, claiming I'd been hostile toward him since the coffee incident. But Khalil made a crucial mistake. He forgot that Slack keeps complete logs of every conversation. You can delete messages from your view, but the company still has records of everything. I downloaded the full Slack export and compared it to Khalil's screenshots. The differences were obvious. Messages were cut off mid-sentence. Timestamps were wrong. Responses were deleted to change the context. I had proof that he'd doctored evidence to frame me. But that wasn't all I found. While reviewing the HR shared drive for my original research on Tina, I'd stumbled across Khalil's application materials. His resume was impressive. Harvard graduate, previous internship at a Fortune 500 company, Dean's List every semester. Too impressive. I decided to do a little fact-checking. A quick call to Harvard's alumni office, claiming to be verifying employment credentials. Khalil Turner? No record of any student by that name graduating in the last 5 years. The prestigious internship? The company had never heard of him. Even his undergraduate degree was fake. I compiled everything into a clean, professional package and sent it to the legal department's ethics hotline. The doctored screenshots, the education fraud, the false credentials. Khalil was gone before the next week's intern lunch meeting. No goodbye email. No farewell party. He just stopped showing up. With 3 targets down, I turned my attention to Ashley, the receptionist who had lied to protect Jay. Ashley had told HR that she didn't see anything when they interviewed witnesses about the slap. She claimed she was busy with phone calls and wasn't paying attention to what happened in the hallway. But I remembered something everyone else had forgotten. The security camera. Most people don't notice the small camera mounted above the reception desk, angled to capture the hallway where the incident occurred. It's part of the building's security system, and the footage gets stored for 90 days before being automatically deleted. I needed to see that footage before it disappeared. My friend Jackson worked in building maintenance and had access to the security office. Over lunch, I casually mentioned how strange it was that no one could remember exactly what happened that day. How convenient it would be if there was some kind of recording. Jackson was curious too. He'd heard the rumors and gossip, and he'd always liked me. That weekend, he checked the security logs for the date and time of the incident. The footage was crystal clear. Jay's hand making contact with my face. Ashley at her desk, looking directly at us. Her face showing shock, then fear, then a deliberate decision to turn away. She had seen everything. And then she had lied about it. Jackson made a copy of the footage and gave it to me on a USB drive. "This shouldn't exist," he said. "But sometimes the right thing isn't the legal thing." I didn't use the footage immediately. Instead, I waited for the perfect moment. That moment came when the new HR director started conducting follow-up interviews about workplace culture and safety. Ashley was called in to discuss her observations about office dynamics and communication. She repeated her story. She hadn't seen the incident. She was distracted by work. She couldn't provide any useful information about what had happened. The next day, an anonymous package arrived at the HR office. Inside was a USB drive with a sticky note. Security footage from the incident in question. Timestamp 10:47 a.m. The footage spoke for itself. Ashley was called in for another meeting. This time, she was asked to explain the discrepancy between her statement and the video evidence. She tried to claim she'd forgotten, that she was confused, that she didn't want to get involved. But lying to HR during an official investigation is a fireable offense. Failing to report workplace violence is a violation of company policy. Creating false statements is grounds for immediate termination. Ashley was let go for failure to report a workplace incident and providing false information during an investigation. The woman who pretended not to see my humiliation was escorted out of the building by security. I sent myself another bouquet that day. This time I included a card, for all the things people choose not to see. The office atmosphere had changed completely. People were quieter, more careful. They watched their backs and thought twice before making comments. Word had gotten around that 3 people had been fired or demoted in just a few months. They didn't know it was all connected. They didn't know I was behind it, but they sensed something was different. For the first time in years, no one interrupted me in meetings. No one dismissed my ideas. No one made jokes at my expense. They were too busy wondering who might be next. Monica kept her head down and tried to rebuild her reputation. The new interns were polite and professional. The replacement receptionist was friendly and helpful. But Jay was still there. The man who had slapped me was still my boss, still running the department, still acting like nothing had ever happened. Sometimes I caught him watching me with a confused expression, like he couldn't quite figure out what was different. He'd noticed that his allies were disappearing, but he couldn't connect the dots. Every time I walked past his office, I smiled. Not a fake smile or a forced smile, but a genuine, knowing smile that scared him more than any confrontation could have. Because Jay understood on some level that quiet people aren't powerless people. We're just patient people. And my patience was about to pay off in a very big way. Taking down Jay required a different strategy. He was senior management, protected by executive privilege and a network of powerful connections. I couldn't just document his mistakes or expose his lies. I needed something bigger. I started paying closer attention to his daily routine, his meetings, his phone calls, his expenses. I volunteered to help with department budget reports and vendor coordination. I attended client dinners and company events where Jay was present. That's when I noticed the pattern. Jay had expensive tastes, designer clothes, luxury watches, imported cars, but his salary, while generous, shouldn't have supported that lifestyle, especially not with the child support payments I'd seen deducted from his paychecks. The designer tie he'd been so upset about? $3,000. His watch? $15,000. His car? $80,000. Something didn't add up. I started tracking his vendor meetings. Jay approved all major departmental purchases, office supplies, technology, consulting services. He had relationships with several preferred vendors who consistently won our contracts. But when I looked closer at the invoices and receipts, strange patterns emerged. Inflated prices for basic services, payments to consulting companies that had no online presence, approved expenses that didn't match the work delivered. I began keeping copies of everything. Purchase orders, approval emails, vendor contracts, payment schedules. I created spreadsheets tracking unusual expenses and suspicious vendor relationships. Slowly, a picture emerged of systematic financial fraud. The breakthrough came during a routine vendor meeting. Jay had invited me to take notes while he met with representatives from Premier Solutions Group, a consulting firm that had received over $200,000 in contracts during the past year. The meeting was weird from the start. The consultants didn't seem to know much about our industry. They couldn't answer basic questions about their proposed services. Their business cards looked cheaply printed. After they left, I did some research. Premier Solutions Group had no website, no office address, no client testimonials. Their business registration showed they'd been incorporated just 6 months ago. But here's the interesting part. The business was registered to someone named Thomas J. Same last name as my boss. I dug deeper. Property records, family information, social media connections. Thomas J. was my boss's cousin, a cousin who lived in a different state and had no experience in consulting or business services. Jay was funneling company money to his family through fake consulting contracts. I found 2 other vendor relationships with the same pattern. Strategic Advisory Services was registered to Jay's brother-in-law. Innovation Consulting Partners belonged to his college roommate. Over the past 2 years, Jay had stolen nearly $400,000 from the company through inflated vendor payments and kickback schemes. I had the receipts, literally. But I needed more than financial evidence. I needed proof that Jay knew what he was doing, that it was intentional fraud rather than poor oversight. That proof came from an unexpected source, Jay himself. During a particularly stressful week, Jay had been taking frequent phone calls in his office with the door closed. The walls in our building are thin, and his voice carries when he's agitated. I started keeping my phone's voice recorder running during the day, just in case. It was a habit I'd developed after the slap incident, documenting everything, always. One afternoon, Jay got a call that made him panic. He was shouting about keeping things quiet and making sure the numbers don't look suspicious. He mentioned specific dollar amounts that matched the fraudulent vendor payments. But the most damning part came at the end of the call. "Listen, Tommy, I know this is risky, but we need to be smarter about the invoicing. Make sure the descriptions sound more realistic this time." Tommy? Thomas J., his cousin. I had audio evidence of Jay directly coordinating the fraud scheme. That recording, combined with the financial documentation and vendor research, gave me everything I needed to destroy Jay's career and possibly send him to prison. But I wasn't going to use it right away. I was going to make sure the timing was perfect. The perfect moment came during our annual board meeting. Jay was scheduled to present the department's budget performance and outline next year's spending priorities. I compiled everything into a comprehensive package: financial records showing the fraudulent vendor payments, business registration documents proving the family connections, audio recordings of Jay coordinating the scheme. I created 2 identical packages. One for the board of directors, one for the local business journalist investigating corporate fraud in our industry. The board package was delivered anonymously Monday morning, marked urgent, financial irregularities, Department 7. The journalist package was emailed from an anonymous account with the subject line, "Executive fraud evidence ready for publication." By Tuesday afternoon, Jay was called into an emergency meeting with the board and legal counsel. By Wednesday, external auditors were reviewing all department finances. By Thursday, the board voted to suspend Jay pending investigation. Friday morning, the Business Journal published an explosive article, "Senior Executive Under Investigation for Fraud and Workplace Assault." The article detailed the vendor fraud scheme and referenced additional allegations of workplace violence. It quoted anonymous sources saying Jay's behavior was an open secret. Jay tried to fight back. He hired a lawyer, released statements denying all allegations, claimed he was being framed by disgruntled employees. But the evidence was overwhelming. The audio recordings proved intentional fraud. The financial documents showed a clear pattern of theft. The business registration records proved family connections. During the investigation, more evidence emerged. Other employees came forward with stories of Jay's aggressive behavior. Previous complaints that had been buried suddenly became relevant. The company's insurance investigators found additional financial irregularities dating back 5 years. The total stolen amount was closer to $600,000. Jay's lawyer tried to negotiate a settlement, but the board was done. They couldn't afford to look weak on fraud. 3 weeks after the investigation began, Jay was terminated for cause. No severance package, no retirement benefits. He was escorted out during lunch, when most employees would see him leave in disgrace. No farewell speech, no goodbye emails. 1 minute he was there, the next minute he was gone. The man who had slapped me over coffee drops was now facing criminal fraud charges and professional ruin. 2 days after Jay's termination, I got a call from the company president. "Malia, could you come to my office? We'd like to discuss something with you." I walked into the executive conference room to find the president, board chairman, and new interim HR head waiting. They offered me Jay's job. We've been reviewing department performance and employee feedback, the president said. Your name keeps coming up as someone who understands the work and has the team's respect. We'd like you to take over as director of operations. It was a massive promotion. 60% salary increase, corner office, executive table seat. After a week of consideration, I gave them my answer. I'm honored by the offer, but I've already accepted a position elsewhere. I'll be starting as Director of People and Culture at Helix Enterprises next month. The surprise on their faces was priceless. But why would I stay at a company that had allowed me to be assaulted and humiliated? Why work for people who had turned their backs on me? I was moving on to bigger and better things. My last 2 weeks were strangely peaceful. Word had gotten around about my new position at Helix Enterprises, one of the city's most prestigious consulting firms. People who had ignored me suddenly wanted to stay in touch. Monica tried to apologize. I should have supported you, she said awkwardly. I was just trying to keep my head down. I smiled politely and told her I understood. The new interim HR director asked for insights about improving workplace culture. I gave thoughtful feedback about documentation, proper investigation procedures, and protecting employees who report misconduct. On my last day, I didn't send a goodbye email to the whole company. Instead, I left a single yellow sticky note on my desk. It said, "Being dramatic saved my life," because that's what they had called me. Dramatic, emotional, difficult. They thought it was an insult. I realized it was a diagnosis of how long I'd been silent, of how deeply they'd underestimated me. They taught me not to react, but to rebuild. And now I don't work for power. I am the power. 3 months into my new job, I got a call from a journalist. "Hi, this is Maria Santos from Business Weekly. I'm doing a follow-up story on the Jay situation. Would you be willing to go on record about your experiences?" I thought about it. I could tell my story, get public vindication, make sure everyone knew how I'd fought back. But then I realized something important. My silence was louder than any quote could be. "I appreciate you thinking of me," I told Maria, "but I don't have any comment. I'm focused on my new role and building positive workplace cultures." The story ran without my input, but it didn't matter. The facts spoke for themselves. Jay was facing criminal charges. The company had implemented new policies. Everyone in the industry knew what had happened. My reputation spoke for itself too. Within 6 months, I was promoted to senior director. Within a year, I was leading the company's largest workplace culture transformation project. I didn't need to prove I wasn't dramatic. I demonstrated that I was strategic. 2 years later, I was in my corner office when I got an unexpected email from Jackson, my friend from building maintenance. "Hey Malia, thought you'd want to know. Jay got sentenced today. 3 years in prison, plus restitution." I leaned back and looked out at the skyline. 3 years seemed appropriate for someone who had stolen $600,000 and assaulted an employee. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. "Your 3 p.m. is here. The Workplace Safety Committee from the State Labor Department." I was testifying as an expert witness about corporate responsibility and employee protection. Companies across the state were implementing new policies based on recommendations I'd helped develop. The woman who had been called too dramatic was now helping write the rules that would protect other employees. I straightened my jacket and walked to the conference room where 5 officials were waiting for my expertise. "Good afternoon," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "Let's talk about building workplaces where everyone can feel safe and respected." That evening, I was having dinner with my mentor, Caroline, who had recruited me to Helix Enterprises. "You know," she said, "when I first heard about you, it was from a journalist investigating corporate fraud." She mentioned this employee who had been assaulted and how the situation led to uncovering massive financial crimes. I nearly choked on my wine. "Really?" She said something that stuck with me. There was this woman who everyone dismissed as dramatic, but she turned out to be the most strategic person in the building. That's when I knew I had to meet you. Caroline smiled. "The best leaders aren't the ones who make the most noise. They're the ones who see what others miss and act on what others ignore." I thought about that during my drive home. Being quiet had taught me to listen. Being overlooked had taught me to observe. Being dismissed had taught me to document. and being called dramatic had taught me that other people's opinions of me were not my responsibility to manage. My phone buzzed with an email. Speaking invitation, Women in Leadership Conference. The speaking invitation got me thinking about my story in a new way. For 3 years, I'd focused on moving forward and creating positive change. But now, looking back, I could see the transformation clearly. I'd gone from absorbing other people's anger to setting boundaries and demanding respect. I'd gone from being a victim of workplace politics to being a leader who changed workplace cultures. Most importantly, I'd learned that people who call you dramatic usually don't want you to react when they treat you badly. They want you to stay quiet and accept poor treatment. But dramatic isn't the opposite of professional. Dramatic is the opposite of silent. And sometimes silence is the most dangerous thing in the world. I accepted the speaking invitation. It was time to share my story, not for revenge, but to help other people understand that they don't have to accept unacceptable behavior. That they can document, strategize, and fight back. That being called dramatic might be the best thing that ever happens to them. 6 months later, I stood on a stage in front of 500 women in business. They called me dramatic, I began, when I documented being slapped at work. They called me emotional when I refused to pretend it didn't matter. The room was completely silent. But here's what I learned. Being dramatic saved my life. It saved my career. It saved my sense of self-worth. I told them about documentation, about building strategic cases rather than emotional arguments, about the power of patience and planning. But mostly, I told them that their reactions to mistreatment are not the problem. The mistreatment itself is the problem. After the speech, women approached me with their own stories, harassment they'd never reported, credit they'd never received. One young woman grabbed my hand with tears in her eyes. "I've been told I'm too sensitive at my job," she said. "My boss makes inappropriate comments, and HR told me I was overreacting." I squeezed her hand. "You're not too sensitive. They're not sensitive enough, and now you know what to do about it." Today, I'm the Executive Director of Workplace Excellence at Helix Enterprises. My office door has my name in bold letters. Malia Tate, Executive Director. I build the kind of workplaces I deserved back then. Places where people can speak up without being called dramatic. Where complaints are investigated properly. Last week, Ashley, the receptionist who had lied, asked if I could provide a reference for a new position. I wrote back, "I'm not able to provide a reference, but I wish you well." No anger, no lecture, no need to explain why. Jay is finishing his prison sentence and will never work in corporate leadership again. Tina left the HR profession entirely. Khalil disappeared from professional social media. They thought calling me dramatic was a way to control me, to make me smaller. Instead, they gave me permission to become the version of myself I'd been suppressing all along. The version that documents everything. The version that plans strategically. The version that fights back and wins. They taught me not to react emotionally, but to respond powerfully. And now, I don't work for power. I am the power.